This land is within the territory of the Saanich First Nations and is still unceded as far as I'm concerned, in spite of what some may say as have been given up through the treaties entered into by Sir James Douglas in the 1850s with these Saanich First Nations and other First Nations on the island. Also, I'd like to acknowledge that most of what I know about treaties I have learned from elders and ancestors of the Treaty First Nations. Now, I got involved in this world of treaties around 1999 when I had the opportunity to undertake some research on First Nation land claims on the island, where the First Nations were claiming that their rights under these so-called Douglas treaties had been broken by the federal and provincial governments. And as part of that research, I became aware of some First Nation accounts of the treaty-making process, which were, to me, far more powerful than the colonial accounts, largely letters written by Sir James Douglas to his employers at the Hudson's Bay Company in London and to the Colonial Office in London. So that's my background. That became more and more an obsession of mine until 2010, when I decided to finally give up practicing law and become a full-time scholar, and to take a PhD featuring the First Nation understandings of these treaties. And that's been a wonderful process. And then in 2017, some other scholars and I got together with the idea of holding a little academic conference on the present state of research on these treaties, and that when we got together we realized we were a group of old white male scholars, and that this was not an appropriate way to proceed anymore. So we quickly contacted the Songhees First Nation, and they agreed to be our partners in setting up a conference, but it sort of grew like Topsy, so that from a group of 5, it eventually was attended by 300 people, and was a wonderful event. So we were very fortunate that the Songhees partnered with UVic on this, so that we had the conference held at the Songhees Wellness Center, and the presenters at the conference were a mixture of academic and First Nations representatives, and from First Nations all over Vancouver Island, so that the attendance was equally split between First Nations people and the settler population. There was a great deal of interest in the treaties at the time, and people really wanted to know more about what they were and what their relevance is today. And out of that conference in 2017, we came up with the idea, the people who organized it, to write a book and covering the topics in the conference, and hopefully including essays from most of the presenters. It's a compilation of papers, and the process of herding the 12 contributors and liaising with UBC Press was undertaken by Professor Peter Cook. So he was what they call a corresponding editor. He had the tedious job of rounding up all of the presenters and their draft papers, sending them to UBC, getting them drafts changed back and forth. So that's why his is the first name among the editors of the book. He did a wonderful job. The other 4 editors are all contributing editors. In other words, we contributed essays to the volume, and we also asked a few additional people to make contributions as well. Now, the book's format, we tried very much to follow some Indigenous protocols amongst the common amongst the First Nations on Vancouver Island. One of them was to appoint witnesses just like at the conference, who would be there to provide feedback on the material. So at the end of the book are very fascinating summaries from some of these witnesses that had been appointed according to First Nations protocol. Yeah, so the introduction is much to do with the conference and the bit of a story about the 2 days of the conference and what happened, and also to some of the ceremonial aspects that took place. Some of the presentations involved singing and dancing. The title of the book is called To Share Not Surrender, and that is basically to indicate that the First Nation understanding of the outcome of the treaties was an agreement to share, not surrender their land. The subtitle is Indigenous and Settler Visions of Treaty Making in the Colonies of Vancouver Island and British Columbia. Now, the word colony is important because the time frame we're looking at here then is from the foundation of the colony of Vancouver Island in 1849 through to the retirement of Sir James Douglas, who was the governor of both Vancouver Island colony and the colony of British Columbia, which had been formed in 1858. So really we're talking about the years, the 1850s and the early 1860s, before the colonies joined Canada in 1871. The first section of the book is sort of background, pre-treaty contributions, and they give the broader, the global background to what was going on in colonial and imperial circles and their views about Indigenous people and their status as humans and what rights they did or didn't have. And also one of the papers deals with the background of Sir James Douglas himself, who's a major figure throughout this period, in that he was the colonial representative during this time period. There was really nobody else. So the First Nations all dealt with him. So we have Douglas on one side and representatives of the various First Nations who had to deal with them and to try and work out agreements as to how land was going to be shared to allow peaceful coexistence between the Hudson's Bay Company employees and later the settler population and the First Nations, all trying to figure out how to live together on the same land, which is a difficult task. And while it started out well, the ending was not so great. We had no idea at all that there would be the kind of take-up that there was, and we were especially gratified and pleased that so many First Nations decided that they were interested in coming to the conference and interacting with the settler and attendees. And I think the settler population were thrilled that it was such a intense cauldron of emotions and opinions and discussions, because everyone was sitting at round tables and we made sure people moved about, and so that people didn't get into their little cliques, and that you would be talking with people you didn't know and maybe weren't comfortable with speaking to. But quickly I think a lot of good feeling developed on both sides. With the outcome, everyone was exhilarated and optimistic about the possibility of reconciliation. If this was any kind of a bellwether of what's to come, that people left with hope. And I think that also was a large part of us deciding, the organizers deciding to take it a step further and try and encapsulate that in book form.